Hello, I'm Gwenydd Jones of the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation. In this video, I interview Raisa McNab, the CEO of the Association of Translation Companies, the ATC. Raisa talks about her 16 years working in-house for a language services provider and how she specialised in translation technology and quality assurance. She tells me about the challenges that language service companies are facing and how linguists can better secure work by assisting in those challenges and establishing good working relationships. Translators, I give you Raisa McNab. Raisa, you were born in Finland where you did your MA in translation studies. What did your career path look like to get from there to becoming CEO of the Association of Translation Companies, the ATC?
Well, I've really ever only had one dream job, and it was to be a translator. So that was the job that I wanted. And when I was still studying, I had my own one-woman sole trader company, and I did do some freelance translation back then in the late 90s. And then I graduated, and basically I had a choice either to go in and start building my freelance career in earnest and try and find more clients and do it full time, or do something different. And as you do when you're in your early 20s, I chose something different. So I moved to France and I was working as a receptionist in Nice in a hotel, and probably would have stayed there for a lot longer had I not been approached by a translation company for whom I'd done a test translation a little bit earlier, which did come back with quite a lot of red and with the comments of, it's okay, it's not brilliant, but it's fine, but you don't have any CAT tools, so we don't have anything to offer to you at the moment. So I forgot about it, and I was in the south of France, and then I got contacted by the same translation company saying, you applied for a freelance job, and now we've got a full-time project manager or project coordinator and translator role available, and would you be interested? So I flew in from Nice to the UK, South Coast in Southampton, and took the interview, went back, found out I got the job, packed my rucksack, moved to England, and that was over 20 years ago now. So that was the start of my career, and quite quickly I realized that I really enjoyed project management. My first job title was project coordinator / Finnish translator, and I did do some translation work, some editing, proofreading work in the early years. But I realized that I really enjoyed the buzz of project management. I really enjoyed about learning CAT tools and figuring out how to optimize projects and so on. So I kind of got sucked in by project management, and then I stayed in that company, Sandberg Translation Partners, for 16 years. But did a lot of different things in that time, and got interested in lots of different things. So technology was one of my pet projects, but I also got interested in ISO standards and quality management. So I volunteered at the ATC's council as the lead on ISO standards, and started developing ISO standards together with an international group of people and ATC member companies, and then got elected on the ATC council, and then that led into becoming the paid CEO, leader of the Association of Translation Companies.
I love that bit where you said I packed my rucksack.
Literally,
how settled you were there in Nice when they called you into London.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear how the path develops, that you went across to the ATC through a volunteer role that I imagine you did alongside your full-time work before transitioning. We're here today to talk about the ATC, but before we do, I would like to learn a little bit more about the 16 years you spent at Sandberg. You said about one comment you just made was, you said about learning CAT tools and tech. Did you have to become proficient in a lot of different CAT tools within the project management role?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very different from one translation company to the next, or one language service company to the next. But the company that I worked in Sandberg was a company working as a sub-supplier of Nordic languages and English to other translation companies. So instead of 1 or 2, we had 10 and then 15 different translation technology tools. So technology was always a big part of the job. And so I got interested in them and figuring out how to use the tools. And then, of course, when the company grew, I got involved in training others. So from doing project management myself, I went on to become a production manager, so in charge of the project management and the translation teams. I did a lot of training, induction training of both new in-house translators and project managers. So figuring out how to teach the ins and outs of different translation technology tools, how to optimize projects and so on. And then, of course, that led into creating induction training materials and so on. So training and translation technology tools were the biggest things for many years during those years. But then I got into quality management, and I was a quality manager for a few years, and that led to the ISO standards work and a lot of different things as well.
How did you get into quality management?
I think it was just a really natural progression from project management, because project managers are really, in a way, the quality gatekeeper. So they ensure that the translation project is ready to go, and they make sure that all the quality assurance checks have been carried out. But of course, when you're also a translator and you understand the translation process very intimately, you can really get involved in there and also start developing the company's own quality assurance processes. So that then widened into this ISO standards development work.
If someone's listening to you speaking now and they're thinking, I'm a translator, but I would quite like to work in-house as a project manager, what kind of profile do you think would make them more likely to get a role like that?
Well, I think being a translator is a really fantastic starting point in becoming a project manager, because you really understand what happens at the other end, so to speak. You understand the translation process. And that also means that you can really add value to the translator in terms of preparing the work and ensuring that all the instructions that the translator will need are there. Mm-hmm. So instead of just pressing a button and sending a project along, what I found is that quite often where you can add value is allowing the translator to focus on what they're best, and that is, of course, the linguistic work. So putting in the effort and the guidance that the translator needs, and the resources and the tools as well, so that the translator can focus on putting their all into the quality of the translation itself.
It's really great to hear you say that, because my experience over the years working with many translation agencies, you do know when you've got a good project manager on the other end, someone who is taking care of their side and just allowing you to focus on the linguistic part, which is your work. It makes a huge difference. And another question that occurred to me when you were talking about all of the CAT tools that a project manager needs to be able to use, would you say for people who are either interested in freelancing for an agency or in becoming an in-house translator, would learning lots of different CAT tools be beneficial to them? Do you think that would help them get work either as a translator, freelance, or in-house?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's always easier for somebody to give you work if you already know the tools that they use. So yes, in a way, but then of course there are so many different technologies, so many different tools out there that it's absolutely impossible for anyone, and especially if we think about early career translators, you just can't know it all. So in my experience of training a lot of project managers and a lot of new in-house translators, and also freelance translators, in my experience, what really counts is the deeper understanding of what different types of tools there are, what do the tools do, how can you use the tools as a vehicle for really getting a high quality output out of that. So understanding how quality assurance works in different translation technology tools, understanding the different mechanisms that the tools use as well. And once you've got that understanding, then you can apply that to any type of translation technology tool. And of course, when I started, we were still laughing at machine translation. Well, we haven't been laughing at machine translation for many years now. So it kind of applies in the same way, in that, in the past it was about CAT tools, and now it's about understanding how machine translation works and how the mechanisms of applying MT, how to do MTP work, and so on. So the same principle still applies, because there's so many technologies out there that you can't know them all. You wouldn't be expected to know them all. But if you can apply your understanding to learning a different tool and taking a different technology into use, then that's something that is really appreciated and also makes your life a lot easier.
So perhaps becoming an advanced user of a single tool could be actually more useful than being a basic user of five different tools.
Possibly, yes. Yeah.
Are there any other tips that you could offer to freelance translators who want to secure regular work with translation agencies?
Well, there is work out there, but I think the challenge is in finding the right kind of language service company that you want to work with, but where also you've got something unique to add. I mean, language service companies get a lot of unsolicited contacts from freelance translators all over the world. Some of them are even scams. So quite often for a language service company vendor or manager, it can be a little bit difficult to find the right people and the people with the right skills from there. So the first tip that I would strongly recommend is to do a little bit of research on the company that you're contacting with. And especially now, more and more language service companies are putting a lot of effort into diversifying or differentiating themselves. So many focus on specific sectors, many focus on specific types of services or specific languages. So speaking to a company who specializes in your language pairs, or who specializes in the types of work that you do or the sectors that you work with, already makes a huge amount more sense than sending a blanket inquiry. So that's my main tip. And the second tip that I would give, which is fairly obvious in a way, in that it can take quite a lot of time until a company that you've been in touch with actually sends you a first translation project to do. But when they do, then it's really important that you do a really, really great job. And by a great job, I don't just mean delivering a great translation, but also, delivering on time, being responsive, being a nice person to work with, and adding that kind of business relationship value as well. That's your one opportunity to make a really positive impact. And if you manage to do that, then the chances are that they will continue to send you work. That's how good relationships start.
I think that's a really great piece of advice. Something that I've observed over the years is, if I'm been in contact with a new company and that first job, if you don't accept that first job, the chances of being asked a second time seem to become slimmer. I don't know why that is, whether there is some kind of list of preferred suppliers and perhaps you slip down it. So I haven't found that it doesn't mean they don't come back. They might, but it might be a while before they do. And it may be that they just go to whoever was next on the list. And if that person responds, then they're the ones who are going to become the regular supplier, assuming they do a good job.
I mean, of course, companies are always looking for translators or suppliers, vendors, whatever term you want to use, that they can use and rely on. Mm-hmm. So, the people who get the most work are the people who are the most available, who've got the biggest fit. So in a way, if you ask a new translator, you don't really know them, you don't know anything about them, your assumption might be that they're already fully booked. So, there's no point in trying. So there are all these sorts of underlying assumptions, which may or may not be true. It's just the way that we interact. So that first contact it can be really, really critical.
Yeah, you don't want to give somebody too much information and be writing a 3-paragraph email, because who wants to read it? But at the same time, perhaps a comment saying, I do want to work with you. I'm really busy. Please contact me next time. Perhaps that makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And what I've also, I haven't been doing active project management for a few years now, but what I have also realized that in a way the landscape of the work that we're doing has been changing for the past few years and continues to change quite rapidly. So one of the biggest pieces that you can add to this whole conversation is being ready to also try out new things, try out new solutions, be open to new types of services which are appearing, every so often. And that's something that I know that many of our member companies have really been struggling with, finding linguists who are able to jump on board and learn new skills, learn to handle different types of new services and so on. A couple of years ago, that was machine translation post editing, and now that's more mainstream. And now it's something completely different, language related. So that's also another way of kind of getting your foot in the door, being open to exploring different types of linguistic tasks.
Mm-hmm. And so you've described your career. At any point, did you ever consider becoming a freelance translator? I know that at the moment you freelance as a content creator, that you do 1 day a week alongside your work with the ATC.
Well, of course I did, and especially in the early years when I still had this dream of becoming a full-time freelancer. But to be honest with you, I've realized many years ago now that I never would have been a brilliant translator. I would have become an okay translator, but I never would have been a fantastic translator. And what I love about the content creation work that I do now is the creativity and creating something from scratch. And that's something that I can really apply the experience that I've had, and the understanding that I have with working with my own few clients that I have at the moment. So yes, in a way, but I don't regret not becoming a full-time translator. I find that I've been able to fulfill my areas of interest a lot better in doing what I've actually ended up doing.
Because I'm curious, you said I was never going to be a fantastic translator. Why do you think that?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that I can see the detail, but I don't care enough about the detail to be a really brilliant translator. That's one of the reasons. And another reason is that I enjoy the creativity of creating something from scratch more than I enjoy this idea in translation of rendering an existing idea in another language. But I've got the utmost respect to all the freelance translators and interpreters out there, because I know how challenging that job is and how wide a skill set they employ in the work that they do.
That was a great point about the detail. I think people going into translation don't necessarily realize that it is detail all the way from start to finish. Lots and lots of detailed rules, which is one of the reasons why you never stop learning.
Yeah.
There's always something new to learn, something new to look up. So moving across to your current job, you've been CEO of the Association of Translation Companies since 2018. Could you tell us a bit about the ATC and what it does?
The ATC is the leading voice for language service companies in the UK. So it is a professional trade association with 215 member companies. And the name comes from 1976 when the ATC was founded. So it's one of the oldest language service associations in the world. But the term that I use these days and that we use in the association is language service companies, because our members don't just these days, like they might have done in 1976, offer translation and interpreting services, but a whole suite of different types of language services. So the ATC really promotes language services in the UK and represents member companies, language service companies, producing complex multilingual translation, interpreting and other language services, both to the UK's public sector and then, of course, companies, organizations in the UK and abroad. So we do a lot of different things. Of course, we're a community of peers. So we've got networking events and an annual conference, but we do a lot of training and business support as well. So we operate an ISO certification body called ATC certification. We're just about to launch a language services project management course, which is an online on-demand e-learning course. We do a lot of, over the past few years, we've done a lot of business support around Brexit and COVID support and so on. And that's where a lot of our member benefits are also in. But then we also do a lot of collaboration projects together with our industry stakeholders. So associations, organizations representing translators and interpreters, but then also with business associations. So we work together with different associations from different sectors and with UK business associations to promote the value of languages and language services.
When you talk about a suite of language services, so of course we have translation and interpretation. What are the other services that come into that group?
Well, of course, everything to do with media and audiovisual localization, creative language services is part of that. So, for example, over the past few years, and especially throughout the pandemic, e-learning has become a big thing in many of our member companies. So not just delivering the language side, but being a partner in creating e-learning projects with a client company, for example. Language data for some of our member companies is huge. But more than anything else, what we're seeing at the moment is that language service companies are becoming more and more like partners with their clients. So not just providing the translation of a document or a translation of an e-learning course, for example, but advising on language. So language consultancy, cultural consultancy, advice around how to manage multilingual environments in this global world that we live in these days.
So as you highlighted a little while ago, there is a lot of change and these companies have to suddenly offer a whole host of new services. What are the biggest challenges that they're facing within this scenario?
I think one of the challenges definitely is the question of where are we going with all of this. We talk about diversification, or we talk about specialization, we talk about new services and so on. But sometimes it can be really difficult to see where your clients are going or where you should be investing your technology development or your service development and so on. So there's a lot of shifting sands there in the landscape. And of course, global business is also changing very rapidly. And in a way, although we talk about language service companies or translation companies as a lump, there are so many different ones, and we see that within our membership, that there is really hugely wide variety in the types of services and types of specialist niches that language service companies occupy. So finding your niche and remaining relevant and continuing to add value to your clients, I think is one of the challenges that ATC member companies has at the moment. The other is, of course, the living in the global landscape that we have at the moment. So we've got we're still reeling from the consequences of Brexit and the pandemic, and now we've got a huge cost of living crisis. So some of the challenges that language service companies are undergoing at the moment have to do with running a business, essentially. So not necessarily about language technology or the types of services that we sell, but purely about building and running a business, hiring people, being an employer, being a responsible, fair client to the translators, interpreters, language specialists that they work with as well, whilst continuing to deliver an attractive, interesting, service to their clients.
It's funny. I made a note of when you said that one of their challenges is finding their niche and staying relevant, and I would almost mirror that down to one of the challenges the freelancer is facing in getting work with the language service providers, finding their niche and staying relevant. And perhaps there's something in that. The difficulty isn't just. I always see the freelancer perspective. The difficulty isn't just down here at the end of the supply chain. It's actually running right through the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can't be. I mean, this whole landscape of ours, the language services arena, is just so diverse at the moment that you cannot possibly be all to everybody. Like you've almost got to start specializing somehow. Because there are so many different types of services out there, and they are becoming more and more specialist as time goes on. But then at the same time, other services like MTP, I've mentioned a few times now, it's no longer a specialist service. It's just another tool that we use to deliver a service, deliver a project that's fit for the purpose that the client needs it to serve.
Yes, MTP, machine translation, post editing. It's almost expected now to be on the CV within the translator's skill set, I should imagine.
Yeah.
And another question that just occurs to me, I'm sure you won't know the numbers, and I'm not expecting you to, but within the language service companies, what kind of percentage do you think you have between in-house employees and freelancers?
Well, that really depends on the company. So the company that I worked in was fairly unique in that it had a very large in-house team of translators. And one of the reasons for that was that Sandberg specializes in the Nordic languages and English. So a very, very limited group of languages. So some of the ATC's member companies who are very specialized in a specific language or a language group may have in-house translators, but many don't have any in-house translators, or have got one project manager who also revises translation work. So with many of the ATC's member companies, 100% of the work is outsourced to freelance translators and interpreters. For some, it's 70% goes out, 30% is done in-house. So it really depends. But if you think about it, if you like, a traditional language service company provides services in any language, there's no way that anybody will be having an in-house team with more than 5 to 10 languages, no matter how big they get.
Moving along a little bit, one of the complaints you hear from translators, or a negative feeling that you get among the freelancers, is this feeling of being viewed as a commodity. Anyone's replaceable, certain companies not valuing the training and the experience, and pretty much focusing just on price. Do you think that's a fair assessment of how language service providers view their freelancers?
Well, no, I don't really, but I think it's a reflection of the development that we've seen with technology over the years. That's one part of it, in that we've moved from project managers managing individual projects and directly engaging with suppliers via email or phoning them up and so on. So from that environment, which is very labor intensive and slow and heavy, we've moved on to an environment where many language service companies operate some kind of a vendor portal. So you post projects and then linguists approve them. I think that's got something to do with it, in that if you apply that kind of a process, then you need to figure out how do you retain those personal relationships? How do you take care of your suppliers if you still ask them to use a much faster, much leaner vendor portal that allows you to confirm projects and turn around projects to your clients much quicker? That's one part of it. But one of the reasons why we're in that landscape is also because there's been a fragmentation of translation projects over the years. So when I first started, we used to do automotive manuals, and you had 3 weeks to do them, and one translator, one reviser. Those kinds of jobs are really not out there anymore. They're much more fragmented. So translation projects move a lot faster, and they're a lot smaller these days, which means that project management needs to move with those times, and project management needs to be a lot faster and a lot quicker. So I think that's got a lot to answer for, in terms of this feeling of almost like a distance between project managers and the linguists doing the work. But a lot of language service companies have been founded by translators who set up on their own and then had a lot of work, got a first employee in, and continued from that. So the companies that I know and that I've worked with really do care about the people that they work with, and they have got a lot of respect towards the linguists' expertise and skills. And that's never been in question to my mind. I think a lot of the clash comes from this idea that, of course, those same companies want to deliver an outstanding service to their clients. And in that idea of an outstanding service, translation quality is but one part. And another part is being able to deliver promptly, have the turnaround times that the clients want, use the tools that the clients are interested in as well. So I think technology is something that has served us, but has also left us in a situation where we actually probably should put a lot more effort into maintaining those personal relationships in other ways.
And talking about technology, do you think that technology, and I'm talking really in terms of machine translation, do you think that that's a threat to translators?
I don't think it's a threat. And we certainly haven't seen a decline in translation volumes, because there is so much content out there that clients want to get out that was never translated, never localized before, and now can be with machine translation post-editing. So I don't see that or any other type of technology as a threat, but it does change our landscape, and it does change the profession of a translator. So I think there is a real need for us as a profession to also evolve, and to use those technologies and those tools to continue to deliver a high-end language product when that's needed, and to use those tools to deliver a fit-for-purpose service when that's needed, whatever that fit-for-purpose then means in that respect. But I think there is a need for us as a profession to understand those tools and be able to advise clients with the use of those tools as well. So what can you do with this tool? Where is this tool and this type of a solution good, and where it isn't? So using the tools and technology landscape as more of a advisory tool and a productivity enhancer when that makes sense.
It's funny to think that we're all linguists, we're all communicators, but actually listening to you talk, a lot of the points of friction between maybe the freelancer and the translation agency comes down to miscommunication or lack of communication. The translator sees, I have to do this quickly. Why have I only got a little part of a project? Why do I have to do machine translation? Make an assumption it's because the prices have to be low. And in actual fact, that the language service provider is dealing with a completely different scenario that is related to their client and what their client needs. And there's this sort of void in between, this space of empty communication where people make assumptions that perhaps aren't the correct ones.
I'm sure you're right in that. Of course, there is no visibility in a way between the language service company and their suppliers and their clients quite often. So understanding what really goes on behind the scenes, and it's the same, of course, with the language service companies and their clients. In a best case scenario, you've got a really close partnership with the client, and you can negotiate and you can advise them. And in many cases, you get the work and you get a deadline, and you take it or you don't take it, and then you do your best with it. So I'm sure there's something there.
Thinking now towards the future, can you make any predictions about how you think the world of language services is likely to evolve in the coming 10 years?
Well, I'd rather not, because 10 years is a really long time. But I do have some thoughts, and the thought that is at the forefront of my mind is that regardless of what services we'll be selling as language services in 10 years' time, or what technology we'll be using, we still need the people. We still need the people with the high-end language skills. And that's something that I feel really strongly we need to hold on to, because we spend so much time talking about the tools and the technologies and the different types of new services, and there's a lot to learn in that. And I don't want us to forget the language skills that are the basis of all of that, because if we leave those by the wayside, then we lose something really intrinsic in our profession. So we can't do translation in the same way as we did 20 years ago when I first started. That's in the past now, but the language skills are still there. And this is also a conversation that I have quite a lot with universities who train the next generation of translators in their MA degree courses, because they are really under pressure of figuring out what do we put into those MA courses, because you've still got that language aspect, you expect it to have the technology aspect, and then perhaps project management on top of that. So that's a real challenge for them as well. But I think we have to keep the language alive. And I come from Finland, which is a very small language. Finnish is a tiny language. So in Finland, translators, interpreters, linguists actually have got a real responsibility in continuing to uphold language standards and to use good language and to put out an example. And they are really visible there in a way that they aren't perhaps in the United Kingdom with English. So I feel that quite keenly for my own language. So that's the one thing that I'm pretty sure that we'll still have in 10 years' time.
To close the interview, I would like to ask you if there is a message that you can give to any up-and-coming translators who are listening to us today.
Well, I would say go out there. There is an awful lot of really interesting work if you're open to it, if you're open to learning new technologies, if you're curious about different types of new services where you can use your linguistic skills and your linguistic experience and expertise. So there is a lot of really exciting, fun stuff to do out there.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Raisa. It's been a fantastic interview, very interesting, and I'm sure everyone has really enjoyed listening to your perspectives on these different topics.
Great. Thank you for having me, Gwen.
I hope you enjoyed this interview from the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation and in preparing translators for certification through the Diptrans exam. If you like our content, please let us know by clicking on the subscribe button. See you in the next video.